Welcome back to Naked History, the podcast where we take history out of its tuxedo, throw it in a tracksuit, and let it stumble barefoot across the finish line. I'm your host, Dylan Gassaway, and today we're diving into one of the most chaotic spectacles in sporting history, the 1904 St. Louis Olympics. Imagine an Olympic marathon run in 90-degree heat, with choking dust, wild dogs, a guy in street shoes, and another athlete doped up on rat poison. Welcome to the first Olympics held in the United States, where ambition met incompetence on the world stage. So kick back, relax, and let's get into it. In 1904, the Olympics were supposed to be held in Chicago, but the city of St. Louis, already hosting the World's Fair that year, wasn't about to let that happen. After some political wrangling, and with President Theodore Roosevelt's tacit support, the Games were moved to St. Louis to coincide with the Louisiana Purchase Exposition. It was a logical disaster. Few foreign athletes made the trip. Transatlantic travel was expensive and slow, and many countries, still recovering from wars or economic hardship, just couldn't send athletes. The founder of the International Olympic Committee, Pierre de Coubertin, didn't even bother to make the trip. To give proper context to the attendance, in the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris, 204 nations competed with over 10,000 competitors. The 1904 Olympics only had 651. Only 62 of which were from outside North America, and nearly half of those were Canadian. Because of that, the Games were overwhelmingly American. The U.S. won 239 of the 280 medals awarded, but it wasn't just the numbers that made the 1904 Games historic. It was the sheer absurdity of the events. Some events were so poorly organized that they were nearly unwatchable. Tug of war, for example, was an Olympic event. So was plunge for distance, where contestants dove into a pool and floated without moving as long as possible. And then there were the anthropology days of the 1904 World's Fair. Held on off days of the main events, these pseudo-races invited indigenous people, including Native Americans, Filipinos, and Ainu, to participate in savage sports like mud fighting or greased pole climbing. These were not Olympic events. They were blatant, dehumanizing exhibits designed to showcase Western superiority under the guise of competition. It was racism dressed in the language of science and sport. Nowhere was the absurdity of these Olympics more evident than the marathon. It was run in the middle of a sweltering August day. Temperatures soared to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The course was dusty, uneven, and to top it all off, the road wasn't even closed during the race, and often had horses and cars alongside the racers, which kicked up clouds of dirt, choking the runners. Only one water station at the 11-mile mark was available over the entire 25.5-mile course, and that was intentional. James Sullivan, chief organizer of the event, was testing a theory about purposeful dehydration. That's right, he wanted to see what would happen if you denied athletes water. Spoiler alert, it didn't really go well. Only 32 runners participated in the marathon, which included 10 Greek men who had never run a marathon before. Of these 32, only 14 actually ended up finishing the race. So, let's meet some of the racers, shall we? First up, we have John Lorden, an American who was the winner of the 1903 Boston Marathon. He was one of the more capable participants. However, Lorden only ran the first half mile before getting violently ill and having to drop out of the race. Another unfortunate member in the did not finish club was William Garcia, another American runner who was found collapsed on the side of the course after being taken to the hospital and almost dying. It was found he was suffering from a dust-coated esophagus and severe hemorrhaging as a result of a ripped stomach lining. One of the only notable firsts for the Olympics that didn't involve a trip to the hospital were Lynn Tayuane and Jean Mashiane of the Swana tribe of South Africa. Both of them were participating in a recreation of the Boer Wars at the World's Fair. Well prepared for both the marathon and the recreation because they had been veterans of the actual Boer War. Tayuane finished 9th, but Mashiane finished 12th. Mashiane probably would have placed higher, but was chased more than a mile off course by stray dogs. Up next is Cuban mailman Felix Carvajal. Felix raised enough money to attend the Olympics by running in Cuba, even going so far as to run the entire length of the island. On his way to America, he landed in New Orleans, where he ended up gambling away all of the money that he had earned from running. Now, with no money, Felix had to trek the more than 600 miles to St. Louis on foot. Once at the starting line, the only clothes he had to race in was what he was wearing: a long-sleeve shirt, long dress pants, street shoes, and a beret. A fellow racer had to actually cut his pants into shorts before the race began. And once it did, Felix realized that he had not eaten much in the nearly 40 hours it took to get to the marathon. So he stopped during the race to steal peaches from a traveling car, and also stole apples from a nearby orchard that ended up being spoiled. This gave him such intense stomach cramps that he ended up falling asleep for more than an hour in the orchard. Despite all of this, Felix Carvajal finished 4th overall. The first racer to actually cross the finish line was Fred Lors. A bricklayer by trade, Lors made it just 9 miles into the race before suffering from intense exhaustion and cramps. Following close behind Lors in a car, his race manager suggested easing the pain from the cramps by riding in the car until he felt better. Fred Lors then rode the next 11 miles in the car, waving at spectators and fellow runners until the car broke down. Now rested, Lors jumped out and ran the rest of the course. Once at the finish line, he was celebrated as the winner, even after only actually running 14 miles of the original course. Alice Roosevelt, daughter of President Theodore Roosevelt, was to award him with the gold medal, but not before Lors was rightly accused of cheating. In the end, Fred Lors admitted that he was never going to actually accept the gold medal, and that the whole thing was just plain humorous to him. Now we get to our final racer, Thomas Hicks. Hicks is notable for being one of the only racers to have a dedicated team with him for the marathon. His team's car was actually the one that Felix Carvajal stole the peaches from, and although they lost their peaches, Hicks's team was not deterred, as they had a concoction to help his ever-increasing want to slow down. To help Hicks overcome the heat and dehydration, they pumped him full of a concoction of egg whites, brandy, and strychnine, a commonly found rat poison. This was actually the earliest recorded use of performance-enhancing drugs in the Olympic Games. Thomas Hicks ended up stumbling across the finish line, suffering from hallucinations and needing the support from his team just to be able to stand. And after Fred Lors' disqualification, Hicks was declared the winner. This victory was short-lived, however, as Hicks was immediately carted off the track and taken to the care of doctors that ended up saving his life, as it was found out afterward that he had lost over 8 pounds over the course of the 25.5-mile race. The 1904 Olympics were supposed to prove America could host the world's most prestigious sporting event. Instead, they became a chaotic, dusty, and deeply problematic mess, to the point where there was a secondary Olympics hosted in Greece just 2 years later in 1906, to attempt to salvage the reputation of the Games as a whole. And yet, in all its disarray, the 1904 Games gave us a glimpse of the modern Olympic spirit in its infancy. Ambitious, messy, deeply flawed, and full of strange humanity. If you liked today's episode, hit subscribe, follow us, and get ready, because the past is a lot more interesting when it's stripped to the truth. Thank you for joining me for the first episode of Naked History. It was really glad to have you, and I hope you learned something, even if it's that water's good for the body and rat poison isn't. In the next episode, we'll be talking about a man who stormed Nazi beaches with a broadsword, played bagpipes under fire, and made the last confirmed longbow kill in war. So stay tuned.